screen real quick. Peace, peace. Greetings to you all. It's your brother Naheem, aka Lord Abba, aka Mr. Just the Facts. Tonight we're going to be examining whiteness from the Crusaders to the Confederacy to the cops. I'm having some issues with my Word application, so my PowerPoint won't come up. So I'm going to try to read it off of my brother's screen. Shout out to my bros, Be the Power. We in the building. My brother Josh is in the building. My brother Dr. Logic, Where L is in the building. And we're about to start this thing off. I'm having some technical difficulties, people, so just bear with me for a moment while we get this thing situated. I mean, everything is not working right now. It's crazy. All right, cool. Let's go. Let's get to it. All right, brother Josh, can you pull up that PowerPoint for me, brother? And wait. First, let's start with the introduction. Shout out to everybody. We are in a crazy time right now with what's going on, and we have not only uprisings are happening nationwide, they are happening all over the globe. And where there's not uprising, we're seeing places like Iran holding vigils for the death of George Floyd. This is a symbolic gesture so that we could know that there are people in the world who stand with us against oppression and the tyranny that we as a people face here in the United States of America, while this same regime, this militaristic crusading force tries to enforce its will and its form of democracy and oppression and tyranny upon the people of the world. So we are in a very, very interesting time right now. Shout out to the family. Shout out to everybody that's watching. I'm gonna go right into my presentation. Brother Josh, if you can pull that up real quick, I'm gonna see if I can read it. Like I said, family, I am having some issues with my Microsoft application. So I'm gonna try to go in from here. And we just gonna go in. So go to the next slide, bro.
All right.
All right. So this is how I wanted to start tonight's show. I wanted to get into, because I keep seeing this question, why? Why? I've asked this question myself. Why do they do this to us? Why have we been enslaved? Why do we face oppression? Why do we face subjugation? And it starts here, believe it or not. It starts with Genesis verses 9, 24 through 27, really 25 through 27, but I'm going to read from 24. It says, and Noah awake from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done unto him. It says Ham walked into Noah's tent while he was naked. Let me continue. It says, and he said, cursed be Canaan, not Ham. Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. And he said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. So Shem is said to be the so-called Arabians today. They're not the true Arabs of that region. That's another discussion for another time. Verse 27 says, God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. Right? So Japheth is said to be the progenitor of the European races, by biblical scholars. Can you go to the next slide, please? Now, it's a reason why I want to open with this. And I know people are bugging because they like, what's going on? We're supposed to be having this political discussion about whiteness and racism. But to understand how we get here, we have to understand its origins. So up on the screen, I have some historical quotes, and I'm not going to read these all, but I have some historical quotes that show that the people that the Europeans were capturing in Africa, they viewed as Canaanites, not because their Bible said so, but because this was a part of the history. I'll read a brief line. In St. Anastasius' time, the Africans still said they were descendants from the Canaanites. And the sources is there. If anybody wants any of my PDFs, y'all know how I do it. I'm on Sinetta TV or giving any lectures. Email me, lordabba@gmail.com, so y'all could vet all of my sources yourselves. Another source, it says, finally, Canaan, from whom descended the Africans and the Phoenicians and the 10 tribes of Canaanites. And then another source, according to the late Sultan Bello, the fuller chief of Sokoto, at the time of Clapperton's visit to that city, the Yoruba tribes are descended from the children of Canaan, who were the tribes of Nimrod. I have a plethora of tribes that relate these Africans all over the continent to the sons of Canaan. So when the Bible says, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren, you have to go to the next slide, brother. You then have to understand the papal bulls like the Dum Diverses. And Dum Diverses gave power to King Alfonso V of Portugal to reduce any Saracen, meaning Muslim or more, pagan, infidel, or any other non-believer to perpetual slavery. This facilitated the slave trade from West Africa. Anybody familiar with this history understands it. Let's run through the next slide. I'm going to try to get through this real quick so I can bring my brothers on. This is Alexander H. Stevens. He is the vice president of the Confederacy of South Carolina. He's a representative of South Carolina, the Confederate States of America, when they secede. Let's go to the next slide so we can see what this man had to say. He says, this is an article from the Huffington Post that was published June 22nd, 2015. I'm going to read it. This is from his speech. He says, many governments have been founded upon the principle of the subordination and serfdom of certain classes of the same race, which were and are in violation of the laws of nature. Our system commits no such violation of nature's laws. That's interesting. It continues. With us, all of the white race, however, high or low, rich or poor, are equal in the eye of the law. Not so with the Negro. Subordination is his place. He, by nature or by the curse against Canaan, is fitted for that condition which he occupies in our system. I'm not going to elaborate too much on that. I gave the pretext of why this biblical narrative that I opened up with, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. I showed historical references to Africans whom in major African tribes claim a lineal descent from ancient Canaanites. Alexander Stevens, and he's not the only one. There are so many references in United States political history who justify our enslavement due to the biblical curse of Canaan. This is the history of the reign of Philip II, King of Spain. And this is important when you understand the context of why we were just chased down and subjugated to no ends. So understanding what their King Philip did, it says his first step was to strip the Moriscos of their arms. Morisco was a name to mean a Moorish convert from Islam to Christianity. It says, and for this purpose, he sent on different pretenses several regiments of Castilians to quarter among them, by whom a great quantity of arms of all kind were seized. Now, I could stop right there. Now, we could go to so many places in history, particularly here in our ADOS history in America, because as soon as the Black Panthers gain power, what do these Europeans do in the state of California? They all of a sudden are against gun rights. All of a sudden, we could find videos of Ronald Reagan talking about, and this is the Republican darling, the conservatives' god, talking about how people shouldn't be able to open carry on the streets of America. Go to the next slide, brother. Try to get through these real quick so I can bring my brothers on. I'm not gonna read that one. Go to the next one. I'm gonna skip that one. This was an act passed January 1639, Act 10, and this was the statutes at large for the state of Virginia. It in the brackets it gives a commentary that this statute created a legal distinction between quote unquote white and black men. It says all persons except Negroes to be provided with arms and ammunition or be fined at pleasure of the governor and council. So what we're looking at is a crusader mission through Christian domination of the Muslims in Africa all the way up into present day, which is why, in my opinion, Prophet Noble Drew Ali comes to teach us that we are Moors. Let's go to the next slide. Because was that it? Because I don't even know. All right, that was it. Okay, cool. So you could exit out of that. One of the things I want to do now, before I bring my brothers on, is I want to read something real quick from Jeffrey Perry, who does the commentary on the invention of the white race, Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Theodore W. Allen, whom you all hear me reference all of the time. Like I said, I want to lay a groundwork before we get into the meat of our discussion. And one of the things to note is from Allen's works, from his exhaustive 20-year research, was that there were no white people there in 1619. It says when the first Africans arrived in Virginia in 1619, on the back cover of the 1994 edition of The Invention of the White Race, Volume 1, Racial Oppression and Social Control, author Theodore W. Allen, writes, when the first Africans arrived in Virginia in 1619, there were no white people there, nor, according to the colonial records, would there be for another 60 years. He based this statement on the fact that after 20 plus years of meticulous research and examination of 885 county years of pattern setting Virginia's colonial records, he found no instance of the official use of the word white as a token of social status prior to 1691. And he gives examples of this, right? He says the men who ran away with John Punch, an alleged ancestor to Barack Obama, in 1640 were Victor, a Dutchman, and a Scotchman called James Gregory. There is no use of this term until after 1681, when we get into Bacon's Rebellion. Again, I couldn't pull up my PowerPoint and everything just started going crazy on me after a while. So I had to kind of wing it a little bit, but we still gonna get into this discussion. And I'm gonna bring my brother Dr. Logic on where L, so that he can give his breakdowns on some of our research in this regard. So what is this from, brother?
Yeah, let me just say, you introduced this thing really good, right? We framing it. Everything has to be looked at through a certain lens and through a certain framework to even begin to understand what's going on. You started talking about the racial problem is the concepts of whiteness and blackness and how that creates the worldview. You gave some excellent sources, and I suggest people follow those sources. all night tonight. I might come out of a couple of different things, but we're gonna do it like back in church. I'm gonna be coming out of the book of Francis Cress Welsing tonight. So I'm gonna be coming out of Francis Cress Welsing's work. You know, rest in power to the Queen sister, ancestor now. And let's just look at. So I'm glad you brought me on when you did, because I'm a piggyback. You just was talking about how this concept of white as a person wasn't even a thing, right? So let's go ahead and you can blow screen up, whatever. I'm gonna go to it on my screen. Let's first of all, for those of you who don't know, I think everybody does know who Frances Cress Welsing is. She has a MD from Howard, and she is a psychiatrist, and her work was really understanding racism and white supremacy, the understanding and really breaking down the psychology of it. And to me, her and Dr. Nikki Fuller are unparalleled in that particular space and subject. So let's just get into it, right? What does she say about white, as in white people? See, because these names that we use these names and we don't really understand the power and the impact and the meaning. It says the term white, referring to people, was created by Virginia slave owners and colonial rulers in the 17th century. This is confirming what and supporting what Brother Abbott was just talking about. It replaced the terms like Christian and Englishman. So distinguished European colonists from Africans and indigenous people. European colonial powers established white as a legal concept, and what Brother was just talking about this after Bacon's rebellion in 1676, during which indentured servants of European and African descent had united against the colonial elite. The legal distinction of white separated the servant class on the basis of skin color and continental origin. The creation of white meant giving privileges to some while denying them to others with the justification of biological and social inferiority. We have to understand that, right? A lot of people really don't understand what the purpose of whiteness and the creation of it was for. They use that as a tactic, is specifically talking about ADOS. In this short little definition, she showed you how that concept was a tactic used to divide us and separate us from those who weren't even looked at as white at first. What are we talking about? Who are we talking about? We're talking about the Italians, the Irish, the Jews. None of them were white when they first came over here. They had to be classed as white. They had to be brought into the fold of whiteness, and the pretext or the condition or the prerequisite of being allowed into this club called whiteness and getting these white privileges, and we're gonna go into white privilege in a minute, we had to be an enemy. You got to separate from the descendants of slavery. You can't be friends with them because she talked about in this short definition how there was alliance between us, but they separated that by color-based politics, policies, race-based policies that was created out of a social and political fiction. So then we get the thing called white privilege. This is where white privilege was born, separating the lower class whites from the distinct, the high-born whites. They brought on this thing called white privilege. White privilege is a privilege. A privilege is a right, favor, advantage, immunity, special granted to one individual or group and withheld from another. White privilege is an historically based, institutionally perpetrated system. Preferential prejudice for a treatment of white people based solely on their skin color and or ancestral origin from Europe, and exemption from racial and or national oppression based on skin color and or ancestral origin from Africa, Asia, the Americas, the Arab world, so on and so forth. The U.S. institution. Let me highlight this thing real quick. All right. U.S. institutions and culture, economic, legal, military, political, educational, entertainment, familial, and religious, privilege peoples from Europe over peoples from America, Africa, Asia, and the Arab world. In a white supremacy system, white privilege and racial oppression are two sides of the same coin. White peoples are exempt from slavery, land grab, and genocide. The first forms of white privilege in the future U.S. Virginia Harris and Trinity Adorne, I don't know how to say that word, developing unity among women of color, crossing the barriers of internalized racism and cross-racial hostility. That's a site, you can go check that out. But what we're talking about here is how race has always been used as a weapon. They weaponized race. You don't have to, you can get out of the blown up screen at this particular point. Before I go back into that, I'm gonna pass it on. But what we're talking about, how ever since race has been politicized and utilized in America, it's been used as a weapon against our people, against us, against ADOS. And it has its root in Christianity, like Abba was talking about. And when I come back, I'm gonna go into a little bit of that history, but I'm gonna pass it on to my other brother.
All right, unshare your screen, bro.
All right.
Yeah, brother Josh, jump in, brother.
You know what? I like how y'all vibing right now. I'm gonna wait till y'all get on to another point, and I'm gonna hop back in. I'm kind of in class because I need to go read that Cress Welsing piece. I need to go dive into her stuff, man.
That piece is powerful. I mean, so look, let me read real quick from this book that y'all
I need to get that book too.
Right by law, because it's so important to gain an understanding of this whiteness. Because if, in my opinion, based on, before I read, in my opinion, and Noble Drew Ali helps bring me to this point here. That's why I'm always rocking with the prophet. I'm always going to shout him out. Always. Even though I don't rock with I don't rock with the crazy Moors at all, and I stopped rocking with the temple. I rock with Prophet Noble Drew Ali. He brings me to this point. He brings me into the study of what's called critical race theory and the epistemology behind it that has become a part of collegiate courses since the 1980s. These things that academics have looked into, starting with race and its false construct. Noble Drew Ali was on all the way back in 1913. He was against this white-black dynamic, and he called them Europeans, and he called us Moors, specifically Moorish Americans. So let me read from this book, White by Law, from Ian Haney Lopez, page 2, where he says, beyond simply issuing declarations in favor of or against a particular applicant, the courts, as exponents of the applicable law, had to explain the basis on which they drew the boundaries of whiteness. The courts had to establish by law whether, for example, a petitioner's race was to be measured by skin color, facial features, national origin, language, culture, ancestry, the speculations of scientists, popular opinion, or some combination of these factors. Moreover, the courts also held to decide which of these or other factors would govern in the inevitable cases where the various indices of race contradicted one another. In short, the courts were responsible for deciding not only who was white, but why someone was white. When you understand that in its context, and what Lopez does in this book is he gets into a set of cases called the prerequisite cases. And these cases establish for us how whiteness is constructed by law, right? And there's also an interesting part of this book in conjunction, our supposed, let me say, blackness in conjunction to whiteness. If I can find that real quick as I go on, because I think that that's important. Here it is. He's citing from another author. This is from page 21, chapter White Lines. It says, this observation has been made in different contexts with the different language. For example, Richard Ford advances a psychospatial version of this point. And this Richard Ford, whom he cites, says, in order for the concept of a white race to exist, there must be a black race, which is everything the white race is not. Red, of course, does not want to be associated with. Thus, the most debased stereotypical attributes of the quote-unquote black savage are none other than the guilty projections of white society. The white self-regard is at the root of race bigotry in all of its forms. It is not a fear of the other, but a fear and loathing of the self. It is not so much the construction of blackness which matters. It is the construction of whiteness as the absence of those demons the white subject must project onto the other. Now, that statement, when followed up in the historical context, I'm gonna hold up this book right here, and it's
there it is.
The Bloody Shirt. The Bloody Shirt. In this book, The Bloody Shirt, and we're gonna dig into this. I'm gonna bring my brother Where L back on. Josh, jump in whenever you feel you have any points to share. In this book, The Bloody Shirt, one of the these Europeans, man.
You have to study it. You have to study them. You have to study.
In order to study them, I'm gonna suggest this book right here, The Bloody Shirt.
Yes, has to be in every person's library. Even in order to understand the ADOSness that we talk about, because it's a lot of confusion. You have to get that. That book has to be on your shelf. Period.
Facts. I'm gonna just say real quick, I'm struggling with my headphones right now, and I just got a bunch of issues going on. I can't get my PowerPoint, my Word document up, but we flowing. It's still a show. The show must go on. But the term The Bloody Shirt is based on an event that happened and an event that didn't happen, where these racist Europeans in the South beat this European, white man, as you all call him, from the North into an inch of his life because he was down in the South teaching our people. So they went to Congress because they wanted to put a stop to this brutalizing of not just our people, but even their own kind, if they felt that they were trying to advance us in any way. So the rumor was that the shirt that the man was wearing was held up on the congressional floor as some form of a prop, and that this was the rallying cry. Well, the history showed that this didn't happen. And so the term bloody shirt became sort of a right-wing rallying cry. It was a code word. Oh, this is another bloody shirt moment, right? Whereas what we're looking at with, let's use Colin Kaepernick for an example. His kneeling as a protest to police brutality is made into an issue about disrespecting the flag. This was according to how the book paints how these people think is a bloody shirt situation, taking one thing and making it something else. So in the book, there's a reporter, I believe his name, is it Bennett? Well,
yeah, Bennett. Yep.
He is on a train and he's traveling all through the South because he's reporting for a newspaper in the North about the conditions down here in the South. And he's taking all of these testimonies. and these Europeans are
Bennett,
down
it's
here in the
Bennett.
South. Huh?
I just want to correct it before we continue. His name is John Richard Bennett, and the
Bennett?
paper he wrote was
Mhm.
"The South as It Is" from 1865 to 1866.
Okay, and is that a book? Did he make that?
It was compiled into a book later,
Okay,
but it's really just his letters he was writing to his his journal that he worked for. The 8 months he was touring down south, it was basically a compilation of the letters from the things that he saw, the people that he met along his way.
definitely, definitely. And so one of the men, he met a man on a train, and the man, they had a good conversation, and the man was talking about how he didn't support Lincoln, he supported the other guy. He basically got swept up, if you read between the lines, in the race consciousness that is whiteness. But then he said he traveled to the South, and these people were all types of foul. And I'm gonna read a little bit of those quotes as well. And he starts breaking down that everything that they say about us in the North is what they actually are in the South. Shiftless, some other terms that the Southerners used for the Northerners. In fact, they didn't even call it the Civil War, as my brother Dr. Logic reminds us all the time in our little ciphers. They called it the War of Northern Aggression. They changed the narrative of it. The War of Northern Aggression. Why? They wanted to keep us as slaves. And again, I got to quote my brother. He says these Southerners were living like kings and feudal lords down here, and we were serfs, but instead under chattel slavery. This is how we get from the Crusades, how I opened the show, into the Confederacy, where we're at this point in the topic right now. Go ahead, brother. Where?
Oh yeah. So we're trying to understand the particular situation that we're going through now, in that we are dealing with a very interesting time. For lesser words to describe it, it's very interesting, but it's nothing new. And when you look at it as the same situation that we've always been in, you won't have such an emotional reaction. You'll start studying what you're going through and analyzing it different. When you understand that, because you look at the social media and the TV and the news, and you be like, wow, things are getting crazy. But if you read real history, right? I have the book too. If you read real history, you'll know that things been crazy. They always been crazy. They ain't getting crazy. They've always been crazy. And we've always been living in a crazy society, particularly as ADOS, in a situation where we have been used as beasts of burden and tools for the manipulation of economies and governments and everything. So since the brother brought up the bloody shirt, I want to read something. A lot of our perception has been taught to us through public schools and just the education system. And being that we have never been taught the right history, we don't even understand the Civil War, particularly about the Civil War, Reconstruction, and how we have gotten to where we are today. So when we're talking about reparations, because everyone who knows ADOS are familiar with the term, they know that we are adamantly pursuing our justice claim for reparations, right? So they don't really understand. They be like, yo, slavery happened so long ago, but they don't really understand the details. And I was always taught that the devil is in the details, right? So I want to read something that's so interesting. So we was taught in school that the Union defeated the South, and the Confederates surrendered at Appomattox, and I think people believe that racism was over then or something like that, but you don't really know what happened. You have to ask yourself, how did we get Jim Crow? How did we get black codes? How did we get all of 85 years of lynching if the Union won? We know Lincoln was assassinated, but what else happened? I'm gonna start by giving an opinion of a judge, right? Let me This is coming out of the Bloody Shirt as well. Again, everyone should get this book. Hopefully one day in the future, we'll do a book club review on this book. It says, in 1879, an exhausted Albion Touré, an Ohio-born man who is a state judge in North Carolina, had fiercely defended the rights of the common man, colored and white, who had defied Ku Klux Klan threats and the sneers of the conservative bar when he impaneled African Americans on juries and fined lawyers for saying nigger in his courtroom, gave a rueful and weary interview to the New York Tribune. And this is what Albion Touré said. In all except the actual results of the physical struggle, I consider the South to have been the real victors in the war. I am filled with admiration and amazement at the masterly way in which they have brought about these results. The way in which they have neutralized the results of the war and reversed the verdict of Appomattox is the grandest thing in American politics. Amazement because such an outcome was not inevitable or foreordained, because in the end, Reconstruction did not fail, but it was overthrown with impunity and audacity in one of the bloodiest, darkest, and still least known chapters of American history. We don't understand what truly happened to us because we haven't been taught. We have been living in a world where we thought the Union won. We have been living in a world where we thought civil rights have been granted to us. But as we get further in the program, I'll show you how we basically went from private bondage to public subjugation, all based on the concept of whiteness and how it has been used as a weapon here in America.
Ain't that something?
Mm-hmm.
Private bondage. Say that again. And I'm gonna find. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna find the source of that statement. But private bondage to public subjugation, like that is essentially what I mean. And we still see it. You know, what else is prison labor with public subjugation?
Mm-hmm.
You know, essentially, one could even argue that with private prisons now, that's private bondage again. You know, but what I wanted to do, I just wanted to talk about something that just happened. I just seen this. I think it was yesterday or today. Let me share this real quick. Let me share this right here. Bam. Y'all see this?
Mm-hmm.
Virginia governor announces removal of Robert E. Lee statue from Richmond as the city references with Confederate monuments. So this is what we're talking about. Like, look at this statue and how it's like one of the most revered Confederate monuments in the whole United States.
That's right.
Did you say you read about that? I mean, you read about this monument in the Bloody Shirt. Do you remember what it said about it in this book?
I wouldn't have. I can't go to it at this particular time. But they were. That's later on the progression on how we got there. I want to kind of build the people up to how we even get a situation where these people who defied the Constitution, waged war and civil war, and ended up losing the battle, ended up getting monuments resurrected in their image and name. That is a testament and evidence that supports what Judge Albion Touré was saying. He said, all except for the physical struggle, the Confederates won the war. And this is a testament. You don't build monuments to the loser. Only the victor gets monuments. So how do you get in Virginia a statue that's been there for over 100 years of General Lee, one who surrendered and whatnot? Come on, man.
How is your road, the major road in Virginia, still called Jefferson Davis Highway?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And then listen to what he said, though. He said, make no mistake, removing the symbol is important, but it's only a step. It doesn't mean problems at all. The monument there are still inequalities that exist in our Commonwealth and in this country. The government said, calling for change and healing. Let's see. The Richmond city government also announced on Wednesday that the city's mayor and the city council member will, on July 1st, introduce an ordinance to bring down all the Confederate monuments on Monument Ave. See, it's called Monument Ave because they created a whole street where they put these monuments. The former capital city of the Confederacy. Quote, it's time to replace the racist symbols, and let me say it again, it's time to replace the racist symbols of oppression and inequality. Richmond Mayor LeVar Stoney said during Thursday's announcement, declaring Richmond is no longer the capital of the Confederacy. All right, they're like, come on, man, like it's 2020, and we have to say Richmond is no longer the capital of the Confederacy.
Like this is the stranglehold that the European American has had on our people and anybody who disagrees with them. If you ever watch a live stream with, let's just say Nancy Pelosi or Adam Schiff, et cetera, right? The people that are Trump's enemies, you'll notice the I call them the spawns of the Southern Confederacy in the chat, and they're expressing hatred for the Democrats, how they want to kill them, how they want to like do things to them, which is another thing that's noted in this book. Like this mindset, DNA is a transference of information, right? That's what DNA is. DNA is information. And you have in this nation the DNA of, remember that video we was watching by Brother Wesley where he talked about the alpha male and the epsilon male. So you have the DNA of the alpha male and the European being passed on, and you have the DNA of the weaker male, our men, and the what he called the epsilon male. These people feel that they have the right to be dominant. They feel that if you read, there's this group of Moors, I'll call all of them guys the faker Moors, that promote the 13th Amendment with 20 sections, right? And they never read this document in the public. But if any of you ever find this document, it's hard to find online, the 13th Amendment with 20 sections was a proposal by a senator named Salisbury. And what it was a pro-slavery document. This was the counter to Lincoln's 13th Amendment with 2 sections, the real one, the one that was ratified and passed, right? And in it, there's all types of state rights claims and state rights arguments. But one of the articles says that basically we will do away with slavery when we feel good and ready to do away with it. So as Josh was reading that article and then he quipped about 2020, it made me think about this pro-slavery document that certain groups of bugged out Moors be pushing. I'm call them how I see them. They bugged out to me. That they can't even see that it's a pro-slavery document. Then we gain a understanding of like right here, right? Let me
you talk about the 1320?
Yeah, the 1320 guy.
All right, when you're done, bring me on. I got something for that.
Okay, cool. Let me just share this real quick. Now, this is from the Sun, right? It says, let me blow this up. Cruel conspiracy. White politician bizarrely claims George Floyd's death was staged in a plot to hurt Donald Trump. Like this person gets to say this because of her positionality in this nation. I watched a powerful video earlier with Dave Chappelle where somebody did a tweet, and during the tweet, he was talking, it was a fellow comedian, and he was talking about one time Dave Chappelle was in New York and he was supporting what's the little dude name? The little short comedian. I can't think of his name
Kevin
right
Hart.
now. Huh?
Kevin Hart.
Kevin Hart, right? And so he decided to get on the stage, and he was like, whatever anybody in the audience has to say, just go ahead. So people was yelling out stuff, and Chappelle was going in, and somebody said, police brutality. And he was like, you really want me to go there? And then he started talking about it, and he talked about this privileged white woman with her white brim hat on, and how she basically said some cruel, oh, well, that's life. You got to live with it. So Dave Chappelle responded to her and went in and said he got pulled over one time. And he was nervous. He was really scared. And he said the cop, he was like, I have my hands on the steering wheel. I don't have any weapons on me, officer. And he said the cop asked him for his license and registration. He said that after the cop asked him that. So the cop then said, I know who you are, Dave Chappelle. So Dave Chappelle was like, well, why did you ask me for my license and registration then? Then Dave Chappelle goes on to say that was the same cop that killed the brother in Ohio that was carrying a BB gun in the store. Same cop. Like, this is who these people are. And their undergirding is twofold. It's their Christian religion, and it's this construct called whiteness that they begin using in 1681. These two things have to be challenged. But the whiteness part out of all of them has to be challenged. Before I bring my brother Where L on, I want to play something real quick. It's really, really short. Really, really quick. Because I think it captures this conversation tonight. It captures the why we need to stop using these terms black and white in the first place. So let's let this play. Oh, wait, hold on. Do y'all hear the audio?
No, you got to go back and do it
All
over.
right, let me go back. Let me go
back.
back. I keep forgetting. Let me stop sharing. Hold on. I got to play this before I bring my brother in, because I just think this is really, really important and vital to this conversation.
Black History Month, you find ridiculous. Oh. You're going to relegate my history to a month? Oh, well, what do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? Well, come on. Well, I'm Jewish. Okay. Which month is Jewish History Month? There isn't one. Oh. Why not? No. Do you want one? No. I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history. How are we going to get rid of racism? Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man. And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman. I'm all about them.
Okay, so that encapsulates this conversation. How about if you want to answer to how do we fix racism in America? Why don't you stop calling me a black man and I stop calling you a white man? My skin is brown. My skin is clearly brown. Clearly. So, like, until we tackle this issue, this perception of power, because we teach in our lessons that power is an illusion. It is an illusion. And they gave themselves the perception of power. And they did everything within their power to keep us at the bottom of the totem pole in this society. And they used whiteness. They used it as a cudgel, as a blunt object to bash us across the head with. Noble Drew Ali asks and answers this question in our questionnaire. What is meant by white? And the answer is white means purity, Purity means God, and God means the ruler of the land. So some people not understanding critical race theory took that to mean Noble Drew Ali was spreading some pro-white doctrine. No, he didn't call him by that name. But right before that, it says, what name does Satan give himself? Answer, God. So we go back. We go back to it. What is meant by white? White means purity. Purity means God, and God means the ruler of the land. And if there's a ruler of the land, then there's subjects. And that goes against everything that this Constitution was centered around. Everything. There were slave masters who helped put the Constitution together, who refused to use terms like slave and terms like white man in their Constitution because they knew that it would negate everything that they were trying to do. And so this whiteness and this blackness became merely a socio-political construct used to create mentally a higher caste and a lower caste. And the book White by Law bears this out unequivocally. Go ahead, brother Will.
Yeah, well, so before I get into the other things I want to get into, I just want to talk about what you have been talking about in the video clip that you showed. For one, like that last piece you just said was important to understand this, that when he's saying that there was arguments when they were creating the Constitution, that certain people didn't want to use certain language, but that was for the creation of the Constitution for the federal government. Okay, so what couldn't be done on the federal level, you saw being done on the state level. We just earlier in the show, I talked about and read how Virginia was the first state to put racial language into legislation in terms of white people, black people, and so on and so forth. Rewind and go back. So what they couldn't do in the federal, when they lost the federal argument, and see, this is what frames the entire battle and balance of power in America, is states. It's the entire federalism against anti-federalism, and what you can do legislatively with the federal government and with state government. State governments have been able to impose their will and domination on the people in a way that is absolute. The federal government hasn't even been able to save us in many respects because we have lost we're not lost, but we never had the security of the state. We never had the state's interest. So even during the Reconstruction time, that protection that we had was short-lived because of trickery and tactics, masterful tactics by states' rights, segregationists, and secessionists, right? But I want to talk about what the video clip Morgan Freeman said. His answer to the question, I understand what he meant, but he didn't go far enough for me. He said, what are we supposed to do about racism? And he said, stop talking about it. Stop. I do agree with stop calling me black and stop calling me white. We have to do away and destroy the race classification system altogether. The race classification system is a system of white supremacy and warfare. It has, as long as you look at yourself as being black and they look at themselves as being white, we are going to be diametrically opposed forever, and it's going to be an ongoing warfare. So we have to. Let me know
when you want me to share your screen, bro.
So we have to get rid of that. You can share it right here in a second. So Abba was also talking about when he was mentioning Noble Drew Ali and bringing in the religious and kind of the spiritual element of this whole thing, because you can't have one without the other. You can't have the physical without the spiritual, because the material is only given evidence that the spiritual exists. So we understand that this is something evil spiritually that's being manifested in a physical way. So let's tie that back in. How do they justify this whiteness? And he was saying that they've said white means God, God means ruler. And let's get more into that. Share the screen, brother. Now we coming back from Frances Cress Welsing. She says, Europeans seeing human race through race-colored glasses. Beginning in the 15th century, Europeans began to see the world through race-colored glasses. At first, their priests and popes justified the new worldview as God's law revealed to Christians. By the 18th century, their scientists used their racial lens to construct racial categories for human beings with distinct hierarchies based on religion. And notice how that comes first: religion, ethnicity, and skin color. European slave owners in the colonies created a whole legal system based on race. And by this is the, and people understand that that's the first time this has ever happened. This is why the ADOS justice claim is so specific. There has never been a legal system based on race until America did it. Understand that. And by the 19th century, politicians asserted that race was the reason Europeans and European Americans deserve to run the world. To understand why and how this happened, we need to examine elements of the history of Europe and the United States. But first, let's start with a working definition of race, because we must understand race. And if none of you have ever heard of the People's Institute, Google the People's Institute. There's a treasure chest of wealth in regards to race and all of that good stuff there. It says race is a species classification of human beings created by Europeans, whites, which assign human worth and social status using white as the model of humanity and the height of human achievement for the purpose of establishing and maintaining privilege and power. You have to understand that, right? So we could take a little pause right there, right? Before we go back.
Read that
a whole
again.
lot
That
to
needs
get
to be read again. Read that again, please.
That was, and that's coming from Francis Cress Welsing. And it's so crazy because I never really got into Welsing's work like that when I was younger. I was just into my Malcolm type, going on my 5%. My pops used to talk about her all the time, but I never was really into her like that. And, you know, everything happens the way it's supposed to happen because she, for this conversation, I mean, her mark is indelible because what she said ties right into what we're building on and what we're going into right now.
Absolutely. Let's get deeper, right? Because a lot of people, I usually try to stay away from the religious conversations, but today, when we're understanding whiteness and how and why it's been given the authority and how its origins, we have to get into the religious concept. And you invoke Noble Drew Ali, and a lot of people have criticized his positions, but I'm going to I ain't gonna kind of do it, but Dr. Francis Cress Welsing is not even a Muslim, right? She has no connection to any Moorish Science Temple of America. For all I know, she's a Christian. But look at what she's saying about the Moors. Let's get into this. It says, let me highlight this real quick. Biology, the blood lens. We're all talking about race and white and white supremacy and this whole trick bag that we're in. It says race as a biological concept was created in the 15th century Spain. Understand this, people, how important Moorish history is. Not on a religious level. You can add the religious aspect to it, but not just on a religious level, but on a historical, scientific, and world-altering, paradigm-shifting level. You have to understand Moorish history. Race as a biological concept was created in the 15th century Spain by the Spanish Inquisition in 1492. Just as Columbus was sailing the ocean blue and getting lost, the Christian kingdom of Ferdinand and Isabella succeeded in driving out the Moors, African and Arab Muslims, who had ruled the Iberian Peninsula. I don't agree with her date. She says 721 AD. I say 711, but 711. That's neither here nor there. Under Moorish rule, Spain had been the center of European culture. The Moors built 11 universities, thousands of bookstores, hot and cold running water perfumed with roses, and a system of public baths for poor as well as rich. Moor cities were centers of trade with Africa and Asia. Jewish people flourished during the Moorish Empire. They had major roles in education and commerce and were treated more justly than at any other time in European history. This is the Black Moors who are doing this, right? This is a just system. We're in Europe. We're not beating nobody's skin off. We're not hanging people and cutting their skins off. What we're talking about is the spirituality of the people. What we're talking about is when a wicked people are in charge of a nation and a society, what we see the behaviors and the conditions are. And when a just people are in charge of a society, what we see the behaviors and conditions are. It says, but the Christians conquered, but the Christians' conquest changed all that. The Inquisition demanded that all Muslims and Jews convert to Christianity or face expulsion from Spain. That's when Brother Abba was talking about the Moriscos and all these different converts that happened later on. Many converted by practice. Many converted, but practiced their religions in secret. So the Inquisition established the infamous practice of, this is very important. I don't speak the Spanish or Latin, but it says limpieza de sangre, testing the blood, as well as the family tree of Moors and Jews to ferret out non-Christians. One drop of dark blood and you were out. The tradition of one drop, see, people think the one drop rule started in America.
Mm-hmm.
It did not. It started in Spain. The tradition of one drop of dark blood lived on in the apartheid South until very recently. If you lived in South Carolina and had 1/16 Black ancestry, you were legally classified as Black. If you lived in Louisiana, the percentage was 1/32. So crossing state lines could change your entire ancestry. It is a coincidence. It is a coincidence that the Inquisitors did their racial blood test wearing long white robes and pointed hoods. What does that sound like? Come on now.
Now, anybody that was watching from the beginning, you saw how I tied in elements of yesterday, particularly dealing with Christian rule over the Moors, over these Africans, right? And their domination and subjugation, and how it affects us today, which is a part of the reason why we named this show what we named it, right? From the Crusaders to the Confederates to the cops. This is where the police officers today are deriving. Like, this is a long lineage. And I'm so glad, right? Like, I want to pat myself on the back and give a shout out to my brothers that we can teach and not be dogmatic, right? Nobody has to be into what I'm into for me to teach. I don't have to force this on anyone. And we don't have to teach falsehoods as an exit hatch for lack of wanting to even do anything. Like, the Moors are the rightful rulers of the land and we don't need driver's licenses and all of the other bogus nonsense that comes from, believe it or not, the Confederates. This stuff that a lot of these, wait, hold on, wait a minute. Let me get into this real quick. A lot of stuff that you hear, a lot of these Moors, I call them the faker Moors, they don't follow Noble Drew Ali at all, at all. A lot of what they teach is adopted from the sovereign citizen movement. And this movement, it really was an ongoing movement. The people that you see standing in front of courthouses and city halls with AR-15s and machine guns, etc., heavily armed European Americans, or you call them white men, these are those people. These are the militia. They believe all of that stuff. These are the people that spread the lie that the 14th Amendment was never ratified, that the United States of America isn't really a country, it's a corporation. See, if you understand what my brother Ware L had read earlier from Out of the Bloody Shirt, how these people changed the narrative. They rewrote history. They didn't lose. They just lost a little bloody skirmish, and that was it. One of the things that they said was that the Northerners brought assassins and mercenaries over from Europe to help them win, because they didn't want to say the quote unquote Negroes helped the North win the war. So they told their people, yeah, we lost because they brought these armies over from Europe. They just made up a whole bunch of lies. And this is what they do with the federal government by teaching that the government is not real, that it's a corporation like Wendy's, Walmart, or Target, as if Walmart or Target could launch missiles and send F-15 fighters overseas to attack their Walmart type rivals in other countries. Like, the concept is just stupid and baffling when anybody looks at it. So I just wanted to add that in. Anybody want to jump in?
Yeah,
please?
yeah. I want to just take this to another point, right? Because when we break down, I'm gonna go and connect a few dots here. When we talk about whiteness, we understand that like when we come from the ADOS perspective, American Descendants of Slavery, and we talk about we have a unique justice claim, and people try to say that we're divisive. You know, especially people that are quote unquote black folks. Usually when we hear that, it's somebody that has some type of affinity to some kind of Pan-Africanism, or they may have an immigrant background or something like that. So they want to call us divisive for saying that we are a unique group with a unique justice claim. And when you look at the position of society, when you have Black America, that we're in a unique position, whereas a lot of times we're not represented in statistics and studies as far as the segregation between, to understand, like, okay, there's Black and there's other quote unquote Black groups, and our justice claim is not the same. The things that cause our disparities are not the same. So they'll call us divisive. But understand that racism, white supremacy, is the unity of whiteness. So if you're going to eviscerate that system, it's going to be through being divisive amongst causing white divisiveness, because that's the only way. Like, you have to get rid of race. You have to fix race. So if we want to look at it, either we're going to be American, or we're going to be calling each other by our descent line, whether you be Italian or Irish or whatever, one or the other. And I will say that, just like Martin Luther King said, there's two Americas,
That's right.
and we represent the other America. There's one America that is at the table, and the other America is the table where the food is eaten on. And I would say, well, see, let me just share my screen real quick. I have some stuff up here. Let me share this real quick. See, let me just show this. I go to this a lot. Net worth by ethnicity. I think this is it. Median net worth.
While you're pulling that up, I just want to add real quick. Remember the show we did on ethnicity and being a minority with Brother Ali Bey showed that we are really the largest ethnic group, because if you're going to break people down by ethnicities, then it's said that Germans have a higher number than we did, but you have Italian Americans, Irish Americans, Polish Americans, Armenian Americans, et cetera, et cetera. These people are grouped together to become white. We got to find a way to drive a wedge between that.
Well, the Germans was and that if we go back and remember, they kind of like double dipping. A lot of them when we talk about the ethnic group in America that has the strongest ethnicity, where it's ADOS.
Oh, that's a fact.
The Germans they're not solely German. They like German Italian, German French.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of mixtures of things. They just got a little bit of German in them. If we knew if they were just how many straight Germans was here, that number would shrink considerably. I'm certain of it.
Definitely.
Let me just go to this one right here. See, first off, we just to kill the argument that we shouldn't be able to have our designation of ADOS as a specific group. Understand, you see right here it says by race. Okay, this is a median household income. And you see us at the bottom. Okay, we understand that. But then when you break it down by ancestry, or you can say by ethnicity, you won't see us on this list. So we don't get representation.
Nope.
You see other black immigrant groups and ethnicities, but you don't see this is Nigerian. You see all these other European ones. You know, they get closer to the top. You know, but you don't see Black Americans that descend from American slavery on this list at all. So we don't get representation. We'd probably be down here with Somalis or somebody like that. And the only reason, the main reason I'm saying this is because I'm tying this into, when you go back and look at the history of America, you got to understand that these ethnicities were not always white. We're calling them white, but they weren't always accepted as white. Did y'all know this bank right here, Bank of America? It didn't start out as Bank of America. Some of y'all might have known, if you were from North Carolina, you might be familiar with Nations Bank. Yeah, but that was a merger that happened. I remember because, you know, we used to bank with Nations Bank when I was growing up. And it was called Nations Bank, but before, I don't remember what it was before that. But I know in '98, it merged and became Bank of America. And so Bank of America first started as Bank of Italy. A lot of people don't know that. It says one branch of history stretches back to Bank of Italy, founded by Amedeo Pietro Giannini in 1904, which provided Italian immigrants who faced service discrimination various banking options. Originally headquartered in San Francisco, Giannini acquired Banca di whatever Italia and Bank of America and Italy in 1922. The passage of landmark federal banking legislation facilitated rapid growth in the 50s, quickly establishing a prominent market share. After suffering a significant loss after the 1998 Russian bond default, Bank America, as it was then known, was acquired by Charlotte-based Nations Bank for $62 billion. Following what was then the largest banking acquisition in history, Bank of America Corporation was founded. So they still have the same charter from this bank of 1904. But how did they get to so you see there was kind of a path to get into banking where you can parlay Bank of Italy to just service a discriminated group, you know, a group that was facing discrimination, and parlay that into like one of the largest banks in America, or the largest, you know, probably owned, not probably owned, but, you know, one of the largest corporate banks in the world, you know. So, and then, but you go back and look at, I wanted to just read something quickly from this article right here. It was talking about the history of Italians in America. I'm just gonna start from right here. Italian immigrants were welcomed into Louisiana after the Civil War, when the planter class was in desperate need of cheap labor to replace the newly emancipated Black people who were leaving back-breaking jobs in the fields for more gainful employment. These Italians seemed to at first be the answer to both labor shortage and increasingly pressing quest for settlers who would support white domination in the emerging Jim Crow state. Louisiana's romance with Italian labor began to sour when the new immigrants balked at low wages and dismal working conditions. In other words, right, man, these Negroes used to do what? We came over here to, you know, start at the bottom like them, but no, we're not going to do that. So it says the newcomers also chose to live together in Italian neighborhoods where they spoke a native tongue, preserved Italian customs, and developed successful businesses that catered to African Americans. Notice any correlation with whom they fraternized and intermarried. In time, the proximity to blackness would lead white Southerners to view Sicilians in particular as not fully white and see them as eligible for persecution, including lynching, that had customarily been imposed on African Americans. So, I'm not going to get into all this. It's a lot more, but in this article, it goes into showing like, man, let me go back up here because this is kind of very important to learn. It was saying federal holiday honoring the Italian explorer Christopher Columbus, celebrated on Monday. This is, I guess, when this article was written, was central to the process through which Italian Americans were fully ratified as white during the 20th century. The rationale for the holiday was steeped in myth, and allowed Italian Americans to write a laudatory portrait of themselves into civic record. For few who march in Columbus Day parades or recount the tale of Columbus's voyage from Europe to the New World are aware of how the holiday came about, or that President Benjamin Harrison proclaimed it as a one-time national celebration in 1892 in the wake of a bloody New Orleans lynching that took the lives of 11 Italian immigrants. The proclamation was part of a broader attempt to quiet outrage among Italian Americans and diplomatic blow-up over the murders that brought Italy and the United States to the brink of war. So let me all right, put a pin in that, and let me just go right here. Let's talk about Irish. This was this book that we read through the ADOS, Breaking Brown book club called How the Irish Became White. I didn't get through the whole book, but in a sense, it's talking about that there was a path to whiteness, and then we see another pattern. Let me see right here. It says, the person was describing the book. He's giving a review, but it's like it was a tough read. It was a story primarily of Irish Catholic immigration before and after the potato famine, roughly 1840 through the Civil War, and the people's struggle to survive in this white Protestant world. It's sympathetic yet tragic story, blah, 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 blah. Ironically, Irish Catholics came to this country as an oppressed race. Yet, now understand it said race, because the race, the hierarchy was different since it was not, in America where it was Africans, the descendants of Africans. Yet, quickly learned that to succeed, they had to in turn oppress their closest social class competitors, free Northern blacks. Back home, these native Irish or papists suffered something very similar to American slavery under English penal laws. Yet, despite their revolutionary roots as an oppressed group fighting for freedom and rights, and despite consistent pleas from the great Catholic emancipator Daniel O'Connell to support the abolitionists, the newly arrived Irish Americans judged that the best way of gaining acceptance as good citizens and to counter the nativist movement was to cooperate in the continued oppression of African Americans. Ironically, at the same time they were collaborating with the dominant culture to block abolition, they were garnering support from among Southern slaveholding Democrats for repeal of the oppressive English Act of the Union back home. Some even convinced themselves that abolition was an English plot to weaken this country. And I'm not going to go any further on that. Let me stop my sharing. But I just wanted to say, if you understand, you see those parallels. How
Yeah,
they get at a point like, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
yeah, I don't know. That might be my computer.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It just cut off.
Yeah,
Nah,
same
I
thing
can hear
happened
you.
with me. Even YouTube cut off. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, it's a lot of strange things going on when you're trying to get this
Tonight
knowledge
was
out. You hear me?
straight, but we still getting the message out there, family.
Yeah.
The message is still getting out there.
I wanted to finish my point though.
Oh, go ahead, bro.
So I was just saying, if you notice the pattern, groups come to America and they're ostracized. They have to start at the bottom. And if you notice, one of the things that happened was they may attach themselves to our story to get some help on the way up, or they may use us as a stepping stone. Like they may have to put in work on us. When I mean put in work, I'm talking about bang on us, fight against us. Y'all go study the draft when we're not trying to. The Italians were protesting against the draft. You know, they didn't want to fight in the war. You know, it was a whole lot. The draft riots, I think it was like 1860 or something like that. They didn't want to do that. They burnt down New York City. There's a lot of terror going on, murder, just terrorism. And if you look at some of the parallels, and I'm not trying to cast anything negative on any other groups. I'm just saying that there's a pathway for different groups to come into America and amalgamate into whiteness and fold themselves into whiteness. And there's just not that path for us. There's never that path for us. If you look at the definition of whiteness as being at the top of the hierarchy, blackness has to be the bottom of the hierarchy to maintain the whole thing. It's no path for us because blackness has to be maintained. It has to maintain the bottom. So what we're talking about is we need to destroy the hierarchy. Now, if it's something where we got to remain at the bottom, I'm not for that. We can go back and just to talk about this statue that Virginia Governor Ralph Northam was talking about taking down. Oh, good. I praise that move. That's a great move. The mayor of Richmond, I got some disagreements with him, but I'm glad if he helped to make that happen, that's great. But that's not enough. Like, if we gonna get, I know where you wanted to go, Dr. Logic, you wanted to get into some more stuff, but if you look at the, what was that thing called? Like the Daughters of the United Daughters of the Confederacy and the Lost Cause movement, that has to be the next step. It's not just about burning down symbols. It's about rewriting the rewritten history to correct the record. It's about doing it's like a social engineering, undoing the social engineering damage is what I'm talking about. And so we need to go and put the real history in the school books from the right perspective and not the Confederate apologist, program that's in those books. Did y'all want to build on that?
Yeah. So I just waiting for you to finish. So what you're saying is important, but understanding that the academic and the education, the public school systems, revisionist history of the Civil War and everything played a major role in it's actually brainwashing, social engineering and brainwashing people with lies. You understand? Because they're flat out lies, what they told. But what we have to do if we want to undo all of that, not only do we have to go and unlearn all of that miseducation and actually teach actual history, and let's not omit some of the most important and crucial moments in American history and just not teach that to our children. What we have to do is undo the legislation. You understand what I'm saying? We must undo the legislation. And I'm gonna go back to the bloody shirt and tell you why that is so important. And we can look at some of the criminality. And we're gonna tie this into policing before this show is over. We're gonna tie that into the policing thing. But I want to kind of support what Josh was saying and what we've been saying all show about why this is important, because this ties into the whiteness, to the authority, to the miseducation, the misunderstanding, and us being the bottom, and why white folks feel that they can have this privilege, that we that we have to do what they say. They feel this innate authority over us because we was brought over here to be the bottom of their hierarchy. We was made to be the floor. And whenever we want to elevate from the floor, they have a serious problem with that. The problems really started after emancipation, because as I I suggest y'all get this book too, since we're doing a lot of books today. The Red Record by the Queen's sister ancestor Ida B. Wells, and she was talking about how life became more dangerous for us after emancipation, because oftentimes in slavery, the slave master wouldn't kill the slave because that would cripple or hurt or injure his value and his economic situation and status. So he would beat them. They would scourge him. They would beat him, but they normally wouldn't kill him. If they wanted to seek some retribution or revenge, the usual thing would be to beat them and then sell them to someone else, because they wanted to maintain that value. So the souls was diminished, but the bodies was valued. But when they lost control and ownership of the bodies, that's when we started seeing our people being murdered in ways that we've never seen people being murdered before. We have to undo the legislation, because everything since Reconstruction has been unconstitutional and criminal. America, since the assassination of Lincoln, has been a criminal operation. And every day has been another crime in progress. And you want me to prove it? Here I go. So, Andrew Johnson, who me and my brothers all agree was the worst president in American history.
Facts.
This is what he did. If you don't know who Andrew Johnson is, he was the president after he was the vice president to Lincoln, then was made president after Lincoln's assassination. This is what he does, right? So he did this thing where Congress was in recess. So Congress was away. What he did was he used his executive powers to start appointing what they were calling provisional governors. Now, understand the South under Lincoln's administration was broken up into military districts, and the federal military was kind of occupying the Reconstruction effort and overseeing it. Andrew Johnson appoints these provisional governors. Now, understand, we were making moves in this moment in time, electing officials that look like us. We were going to make some strides. We were going to pass some legislation that was by us and for us, and we was going to get some restitution and some repair done. Andrew Johnson put an end to all of that. One particular provisional governor that I want to highlight, put some attention on, is this governor named Benjamin F. Perry. He was a pre-war Unionist who had opposed secession for fear that it would endanger slavery, but then had rallied to the Confederate cause and served in South Carolina's Confederate legislature, right? And now, before he was appointed, he expected stern terms from the federal government, but Perry had been pleasantly surprised when President Johnson gave him the appointment as provisional governor and made clear he intended to leave the job of organizing the new state governments entirely in the hands of what white Southerners like to call the natural ruling element. Understand this. Be patient, people. I usually don't read too much of anything when we on these broadcasts, but you got to get this education tonight. It's important that we go through this and you understand this story, because this is the ADOS story. Nobody has a story like this. Now let's understand what's so problematic with Perry. Let's move a little forward. In the governor's first official act, his first official act was to issue a proclamation reappointing all Confederate officials to the positions they had held in the state government at the time of the surrender. Whoa, you see what we're saying? His first thing he did as provisional governor was put all his homies back in play. Hey, bring the guys back in. The same people who lost the war, surrendered, exiled, put under military districts to rule and be governed for their treasonous. And if you understand that this is unconstitutional, because in the constitutional language it said that they would never hold seats anymore. They could never hold these offices anymore because of their rebellion. Johnson said, forget that. And he put his homies in charge. All right, so listen to what he says. This ties in the whole concept of whiteness. It ties it into the religious authority that they feel that God has given them. Let's listen to what this man said now. It says, in his opening address to the convention, Perry made quick work of the freedmen. That's ADOS. When you ever hear the freedmen, we're ADOS. We're the freedmen. All right. It said it was the delegates' unavoidable duty, he instructed them, however painful it may be, to adopt a declaration affirming that slavery will never again exist within the borders of the state. We're talking about the 13th Amendment with 2 sections,
Facts.
not no 1320. Understand this. Understand what Perry was talking about. And this is why there never was a 1320, because they weren't in the position to even force any type of negotiation legislatively with the federal government, because they weren't in any position of power to do so. As a provisional governor, he's telling his people, we have to ratify this 13th Amendment, and he's going to tell why. It's all war tactics. Listen, it says, to adopt a declaration affirming that slavery will never again exist within the borders of the state. African slavery, which was a cherished institution of South Carolina from our earliest colonial history, he said, is gone, dead forever, abolished by the war-making powers of the United States military authorities. It was likely that 3/4 of the states would soon ratify the 13th Amendment, thereby making abolition the supreme law of the land. It was a necessary condition for South Carolina's readmission to the Union that their state include like declarations in their state's new constitution. Understand what's going on right now. Andrew Johnson has put the Confederates back in power, and they're having constitutional conventions rewriting state constitutions. They have kicked all of our we don't get no representation at this time. So we're during Reconstruction, the same people who owned us are reconstructing our new life in America. How does that make any sense? Understand that this is unconstitutional. This is a crime against humanity. Understand that. This is how we are going from private bondage to public subjugation. This is the story right here. Understand. Let me continue. I know I'm reading a lot, but you have to get this. You have to understand this. Okay, the 13th Amendment, thereby making abolition the supreme law of the land, it was necessary condition for South Carolina's readmission to the Union that their state include a like declaration in their state's new constitution. Until this is done, we will be kept under military rule, and the Negroes will be protected as freedmen by the whole military force of the United States. So they ratified the 13th Amendment to get rid of the federal forces and our protection. They ratified the 13th Amendment to get rid of the federal military and get rid of our protection. You have to understand that. It says, but to be no longer a slave in no way made the Negro a citizen. Harry hasted to add. The radicals in the North, who were already saying that there should be no distinction between voters on account of color, forget that this is a white man's government, intended for white men only, Perry said. To speak of extending political equality to the Negro was nothing but folly and madness. A few months later, it had become folly, injustice, and madness. The African has been in all ages a savage or a slave, Perry declared. God created him inferior to the white man in form, color, and intellect, and no legislation or culture can make him his equal. You might as well expect to make the fox the equal to the lion in courage and strength, or the ass the equal to the horse in symmetry and fleetness. His color is black, his head covered with wool instead of hair, his form and features will not compare with the Caucasian race, and it is in vain to think of elevating him to the dignity of the white man. God has created a difference between the two races, and nothing can make him equal. Now, what religion was Perry? Huh? What God is Perry talking about?
That's
Huh?
right.
We
That's
are
right.
understanding that white supremacy and racism and Christianity are all the same thing. You
And now
have to understand that.
I want to, you said something earlier about when the racist, the worst president ever, Andrew Johnson, appointed these provisional governors, which then removed our ancestors out of the seats of office, right? So I want to go to this real quick, because this is something that my brother Grim shared with me. Shout out to my brother Grimmy on now. Now, this is Hiram Revels, and I believe this is in Louisiana, and he's one of those legislators. When the South seceded from the Union, our people took over the seat of government in these places. This is another stab at those people I call fakamores that say that we are still not citizens in this land. Well, if we wasn't citizens, how in the world did we get placed in the seat of power to become congressmen and senators, etc.? But there's a caption to this, right? If you remember earlier, I brought in the correlation of Christianity and whiteness, right? And we're not knocking the black church, to use that term, because without the black church, man, we don't make many of the strides that we make in the early 18s and early 1900s, or late 1800s, early 1900s. The AME church in particular. So we can separate the black church from Christianity. We can do that because we have the understanding to do that. So I don't want anybody to just think that we're knocking their religion per se, but we do want you to understand that their religion gave them this basis to want to subjugate and dominate. As I read earlier from the Bible, Genesis 9:25, curse be Canaan. When you get deeper, and those of you who follow my scholarship and know my research already knows that the Canaanites, once they fled from the sword of Joshua, which is historically written in the biblical narrative, right? They go into Northwest Africa, just like Prophet Noble Drew Ali says, and establishes the cities or countries, if you will, of Tunis, Algiers, Morocco, Tripoli, etc. So this was a war between the Europeans and the Moors. The race war is a holy war. These two things are inseparable. And one day, like I said, most of these shows are seeds that we're planning for latest shows. Sometimes I may just come on here on one of our off days. We usually broadcast Tuesdays on Thursday. I'll come on here and just give a breakdown of some of the other history to give more weight to some of the things that we're teaching on, so that we could get this understanding. This is the origins of it. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to believe it or not, you can't refute it. So let's read what the caption says. Time works wonders is what the caption says. Let's blow this up. It says Iago, which is the name of the Shakespearean character from Othello, and it has Jeff Davis in parentheses. We just spoke of him earlier, right? One of the main Confederates. It says, "For that I do suspect, the lusty Moor hath leaped into my seat. The thought whereof doth like a poisonous mineral gnaw my inwards." Othello. So this is a part of the propaganda that the Europeans were spreading in the South at that time, where you see Hiram Revels sitting there as a dignitary, as a citizen of the United States of America, and he has an audience of these Europeans who we could only guess to be Northerners, because it seems like they are bowing to this man's wisdom. they recognize in this picture his position as an elected official. Now, I don't know if he was elected or appointed by the Congress. I can't remember that off top of the head right now. But look at that picture clearly. It relays something. Look at the men and look at how they're gazing at this brother. This is the 1800s. Again, I want to read this caption before I close this out. Time works wonders. Iago, Jeff Davis. For that I do suspect the lusty Moor hath leaped into my seat, the thought whereof doth like a poisonous mineral gnaw my inwards. So they're calling Hiram Revels the lusty Moor from the character of Othello. They know exactly who we were. At least they did know back in those days, because the literature proves this. So, this is a way that we wanted to bring this information to you all. We wanted to start with the Crusades, which we opened up with, to the Confederacy, which we're speaking on now, to the cops. And I did want to share a video real quick before, because I know we're gonna be closing out soon. And because we want to know how this ties into the police, right? And everything that they've done to us, the book, the bloody shirt. And let me play this video real quick. I'm not gonna play the sound because it has some racy lyrics that go along with it, and YouTube might actually flag it because of that. So let me just play this short video real quick. So y'all gonna have to hear this video with no sound because it has some lyrics attached to it. But pay attention to this. These are the cops, y'all. This is our people. This is what they do to us. This is a legacy. This is a legacy of theirs. Look at this man handcuffed, being punched in his face. He can't even cover his face. I've been in the back of a cop car, punched in my face while I had handcuffs on. So everything that we spoke on tonight shows the brutality that these people have perpetuated against us for generations. Now you see a sister coming in, beating up a brother. In this video, you see a brother who has a uniform on, beating up another brother. They have made our people in.
Yo, you freezing up. You breaking up. You still there? Am I frozen?
No, you're not frozen. I'm here. I'm with you, brother.
Yeah. Well, I want to step in a little bit because I like where he was going, and I think it's important to understand like some of the brutality, because when you see police brutality, you have to, like, I think when we look at connecting it to Confederates, I like how we did that, but I think and maybe we want to do this on a whole another show. But like when you're talking about that bloody shirt, I just want to give a quick story on how like the post Civil War Confederate type of encounters we used to face are real similar to what we see with the police today and getting no justice. Let me just see right here. Let me share my screen. Hold up.
I don't think you can share it with Abbott out of play right now. I don't know.
Can you see it?
No.
Can you see this right here?
Nah, he's got to pull it up. He's got to pull it up.
Ah, man, that's rough. But I'm gonna just read it.
Go ahead.
This is from Professor Dr. William Darity, Sandy Darity's book. It's called "From Here to Equality: Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century." And he really lays out the whole case. He does a great job of talking about the economic data, the history. He overcomes a lot of the myths. We can do a bunch of shows tying in this information, but I just want to just give an account here of just some of the things that were going on. Let me see, and this is talking about the Ku Klux Klan, because we know that there's a huge tie-in between the Ku Klux Klan and the police, whether you want to say it's the sentiments or the individuals that are Klan members, and we know that there are Klan members that infiltrated the police. Matter of fact, he talks about it in this book. I didn't cite that, but I want to just read. This is saying about this dude named Robert Glee. It says, so anyways, like other blacks in the area, in 1855, when he was about 17 years old, Glee eluded his Virginia enslaver and established himself in Columbus, Mississippi, only to be apprehended when he could not produce his freedom papers. When he refused to say who owned them, Glee was sold to John Miller. And it talks about, I guess, after emancipation, like other blacks in the area, Glee prospered in the years after the war under the protection of the U.S. Army. Literate and active in local politics, Glee caught the attention of the state military governor, who appointed him to the Columbus City Council. And he made a successful bid for state senator in 1869, serving 2 terms. In 1875, he ran for sheriff of Lowndes County. Y'all know anything about Lowndes County today? It's interesting. This is talking about Alabama, though. This is Mississippi, that's Alabama. But by which point registered black voters, Republicans mostly outnumbered white voters who largely were aligned with the Democratic Party, 3,800 to 1,250. A highly visible and much sought after advisor, Glee held the positions of president of the Mercantile Land and Banking Company and head of the County Chamber of Commerce. He owned 250 acres of arable land, 3 city lots, and a general store. Think about it. This is somebody just out of slavery. So, for the people that perpetuate the tropes and stuff about black folks not working and not being able to achieve and all this kind of stuff, this is when we coming out of slavery. This is when we just like going for it. When we don't really have those same type of generational type of, at least without, let's say, another 150 years of generational shackles.
We was definitely working, right?
Yeah, we was working.
Let me real quick. Because I got this page pulled up, and that was just the perfect segue. I gotta read this real quick. This again is from this book, The Bloody Shirt. Again, this is required reading, y'all. Like my brother Dr. Logic said earlier, this is a book that must be on your shelves because it details the brutality. This is how we get police brutality today. It's documented here. It's documented here. So let me read. It says, in his weekly letters to the nation, Dennett nearly always refrained from offering comments or opinions. But this contradiction irked him. In the country parts of Virginia, I have seen at one time and another hundreds of white men, he observed. And I doubt if I have seen in all more than 10 men engaged in labor of any sort. A traveling companion he met on the railway going up the line for a load of timber allowed that his company, quote, can't get white men enough, end quote, even though he was paying hands $18 a month plus board, $50 for trained carpenters. Quote, they're too damn proud to work, rather loaf around Richmond and Petersburg, end quote. Now he's talking about other Europeans, so-called white people. It reads, and then most of the whites admitted that the Negroes in their neighborhood were doing tolerably well, performing all the manual farm labor that needed doing. Dennett looked at the list of, quote, destitute rations, end quote, handed out by the United States authorities in 2 Virginia counties for the month of June. In Bedford, all right, I'm going to skip that part. It says, but still, the Negroes were sure to die out from a combination of their own laziness and the government's refusal to allow them or allow their employees to punish them for it. So this part says it's harping on what's previously said in the book, that these Southern former slaveholders are saying, oh, they're going to die out. They're lazy. They're shiftless. They're not going to do anything. And he says, but still the Negroes were sure to die out. He's being sarcastic. From a combination of their own laziness and the government's refusal to allow their employers to punish them for it. So you're lazy, we're going to whip you. But there's another part on here. It says, this is from a slave master. We was talking about this earlier, right? His overseer, Mr. W, would affirm the truth of this assertion. Had he ever once given an order to whip a single one of his niggers? I believe you never did, Colonel. I wish still to treat my people in the same way, the owner continued, but they are fast making it impossible for me to do so. There are always some bad men in every 100, and now the bad niggers spoil the rest. Since mine were free, they have become lazy, stubborn, and impotent. They know that they have escaped from all government, that we cannot chastise them, and they are not like white people. I begin to believe that they are without gratitude. Mine appear to have forgotten all the kindness and lenity with which they have been treated by me and my family. So basically, this dude is saying, I was a good slave master. Now that they're not slaves no more, they don't want to listen to me. These people, this is the sentiment of these people today. Make no doubt about it. This is why they came up with these terms. Now, this one right here, remember, this is coming from the 1800s, y'all. This is a man that's reporting from the South after the Civil War. Peep this. This is for all of these people that, number one, they're anti-reparationists. Number two, they've been running with this white supremacist trope that somehow we don't know how to spend money, that we're reckless, that if we get reparations, we're just going to buy a bunch of Cadillacs and Newport trucks, right? Peep what these Europeans said back in the days. Let's go here. Like, this is real. We shattering.
Talk to him.
We shattering all of y'all's talking points. And if you keep talking like that, and I've had to tell some people I've been cool with for years, yo, you spreading European psychology, or what's called white supremacy talking points against my people. You are part of the problem, bro. And sis, I'm equal opportunity with how I give it up. So it says, he went on sometime in this vein, complaining with a special bitterness that, and let me pause right there to interject. If you ever broke up with one of your girls, or you have a friend that broke up with his girl, the bitterness that comes from that, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a bitterness that, I know I've been there, so I can speak from my own experience. There's a bitterness that comes with that. This is how the Southerners sound after the slaves, our enslaved ancestors, were free, right? So it goes on, quote, the government has taken away all the coercive power from us. A Negro does what he likes. I cannot inflict adequate punishment. My brother is holding up the book right there, y'all. He says, I cannot inflict adequate punishment. He just wants to beat them. He feels that this is his God-given right. That's why I just showed the video of the cops beating on our people. How much does he pay his people? The colonel asks. Peep this. No money wages. If you give money to a nigger, he goes and spends it for whiskey. And I have no intention of making the country any more unsafe to live in than it is at present. Besides, sir, and Mr. W will tell you the same. They are not worth it. A white man will do the work of 3 niggers, and one alive did more than 3 of these freedmen. But everything that they said goes on, and I'm going to read this and let one of my brothers go in. It says, but nothing Dennett found seemed to so confirm the Southern whites in their opinion that the free Negro was shiftless, bound for extinction, than the sight of colored people wandering the roads. Traveling in South Carolina in December, he passed many parties of colored men, women, and children, young and old, many in rags, footsore, obviously hungry. These were sights that seemed to fill every white Southerner with anger, Dennett wrote, invariably triggering imprecations about quote unquote lazy niggers. On the stagecoach, the man next to him had erupted. See those damn niggers? They think of nothing but crowding into Columbia. What do they want there? So now you had those of us who were working. Then you had the many of us that couldn't find any jobs, and they moving. They like, yo, I'd rather walk hundreds and hundreds of miles to a city that is more welcoming than to ever be your slave again. They had consciousness about them. Their conscientiousness wouldn't allow them to just say for a good meal and shelter, I'll stay your slave, Mr. Johnson, sir. No, I'm out. And the European Americans, the white men as they're called, they're mad. They're looking at them like, look at these niggas. Look at them. They just, what do they want here? They don't want to be around you anymore. And this is what Dennett is reporting from the South. This is why this book is so important, man. It's so important.
Yo, we got to teach tonight, man. We going to teach this thing tonight, man. If you could you pull this screen up I got here? We going to get into this policing thing because we promised we was going to tie it all in tonight. But understand this, right? On top of what my brother just broke down on, just let's talk about the origin of policing, right? Slave patrol. Policing in southern states has its origin in slave patrols, groups of armed white volunteers using vigilante tactics to enforce slavery. The groups located and returned black slaves, especially those who had escaped, to U.S. southern states. Slave patrols began in South Carolina in the early 1700s and began being practiced throughout the colonies. Slave patrols were legitimized through fugitive slave laws. These laws required that all escaped slaves be returned to their masters, even if found in free states. It was also known as the Bloodhound Bill. And understand, before I read and continue, that the fugitive slave laws and the Fugitive Slave Acts was the counter tactic to the Underground Railroad. Now let's continue. Slave patrols were officially dissolved after the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation. There are accounts of informal patrols continuing after this period. Moving on, Jim Crow laws. Let me undo this so you can see what we're dealing with here. After slavery was formally abolished, official slave patrols dissolved. Government policies, again, official slave patrols. We're narrating the transition and transformation from private bondage to public subjugation. After slavery was formally abolished, official slave patrols dissolved. Government policies in the southern states called black codes dictated formerly enslaved people could work and for how much compensation. Codes, this is what Abba was just talking about. This was the beginning of that. This was before that. What Abba was talking was like before that even really got underway for real. We was dealing with just the real mean stench of this hate and evil, particularly in the South, gave a legal avenue to control the lives of black citizens, again, through public subjugation by way of legislation. You see the picture of the Klansmen there. At the time, police departments, now this is where we're talking about police. At the time, police departments were being established in major cities to protect the wealthy. Police were unarmed until 1858. During this era, lynching of African Americans was commonplace and perpetrators were not punished by law enforcement. The Ku Klux Klan could be considered to be at its most ruthless in this era. The judicial system did not hold police accountable for their own brutality or for failing to intervene when black people were murdered. There's another damnable, diabolical picture. You see that? That's ADOS life. You understand? So understand when we being specific, it's for a reason. You don't have this no other place, and you don't have this. Once people were free, they were free. You didn't get this public subjugation everywhere else. One of the most violent incidents that marked this period was the Tulsa Race Massacre in 1921, and the anniversary fell just a few days ago on Monday. Mobs of white residents attacked black residents after a 19-year-old black shoe shiner was accused of assaulting a 17-year-old girl. White residents looted stores, burned homes. The death toll is estimated to be between 39 and 300 people, and thousands were left homeless. The massacre was largely omitted from local, state, and national histories. This year, it became part of the Oklahoma school curriculum. Understanding this, right? Police brutality, like this is something that we've been living through. I'm not even going to get y'all can this link if you want to check that information now.
Wait, just real quick though, bro. Go back to that part and go through that real quick.
Okay, I'll go to it.
So we go police brutality and acquittal. Just
let's get to it,
because that ties into what you were just talking about with the Ku Klux Klan. They were really the police of that day, and they didn't face any justice at all.
So, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier in the show, is that we've always been this. Nothing has changed. It's not that, oh, the world is getting crazy, because I've been hearing people saying that. No, we've been living in a crazy world. Just imagine what your family had to go through. And I'm not talking about no ancestral lineage dating all the way back 200 years ago. I'm talking about this is what your mama had to go through, and her mama had to go through, and her mom had to go through. The people that produced us today had to live through this. This is called inherited disadvantage. This is called generational domestic terrorism.
That's right.
Police brutality and acquittals. Police brutality has been a catalyst for protests since the 1960s, including the Watts riot of 1965 and the Detroit riot of 1967. Riots also broke out in Miami in 1980 when 33-year-old Arthur Duffy died from injuries sustained at the hands of 4 officers trying to arrest him after a high-speed chase. The officers were acquitted. Beating of construction worker Rodney King in 1991. We all now understand this. This is 1991. We all remember the Rodney King thing by white Los Angeles police officers, which was filmed by a civilian, sparked further debate about civil rights, and triggered a 6-day riot after the acquittal of the officers. And aren't we seeing the same thing continue to happen? What happened with Mike Brown, happened with Trayvon Martin, happened with Tamir Rice. Like, we're not getting any justice. The rise of Black Lives. Well, I'm not going to get into no Black Lives Matter stuff,
we gotta do all that.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and stop sharing that. But that information, you can go, you can find that information. You know, that's on Fox.
Yeah. No, I mean, I you know, we could go in. I think we could have spent like another 45 minutes or something just on the black code. Like, if you just like understanding that the whole point when the country started beefing up its policing was to make sure that because when we were let out of private bondage, you needed somebody to make sure that that public subjugation was going to happen. You know, like we weren't just, how did they get us to public subjugation? It's because they created black codes. I'm gonna share this. I just want to read this real quick. Hold up. Let me just share this real quick. You can bring my screen up. So, you know, those black codes, man, basically what happened was it was a Civil Rights Act of 1875, and that got passed. But in 1883, it was struck down. So the couple that with, you know, Johnson giving all the Confederates their stuff back, and they get power, they go on and just murdering our elected officials, running them out of office, killing people if they vote. So they change their constitution. They institute all of these black codes as laws. So this one said Alabama's black code, ratified in 1866 after slavery had been abolished, made it unlawful for any freedman, mulatto, or person of color to own firearms, to carry a pistol or any other deadly weapon, punished by a fine of $100 or 3 months imprisonment instead of a lash. Significantly, Alabama also made it illegal for any person to sell, give, lend firearms or ammunition of any description whatsoever to blacks under penalty of not less than $50 and not more than $100. South Carolina and Mississippi, the states whose pre-war black populations had ranked first and second in the nation respectively, and not coincidentally, the first states to secede from the Union, both enacted extreme versions of black code. South Carolina's legislature took an excessive interest in the whereabouts of its black residents, requiring migrants intending to set up residence in the state to enter into a bond with two freeholders as surety within 20 days of their arrival. Blacks were to be actively engaged in gainful work from sunrise to sunset, preferably under the supervision of white masters, and to never be idle, lest they become vagrants. Vagrancy was a crime that could result in fines, imprisonment, or being leased to anyone who paid accrued fines. Furthermore, South Carolina lawmakers passed a litany of laws governing master and apprentice relationships. And one of over a dozen measures, black children as young as 2 years old could be bound out to learn a trade or service by the district judge if their parents were said to reside in another district presumed to be paupers or not teaching their children the habits of industry or honesty, or are persons of notoriously bad character or are vagrants. Black children who have reached the age of 10, whose parents did not live in the district, could be contracted for labor or service for 1 year or less.
Crazy.
So just think about that. Like, who was policing all of this? Who was policing all of this?
Yo,
This is when they had to build up the police force, and these are the people. Yeah.
Who had to enforce these laws? That's where you get law enforcement from.
That's right. And one of the beautiful things about this book, White by Law, one of the things that Ian Haney does, and there's another book that I have here called The Unconstitutionality of Slavery. I don't know if Ian Haney.
You can't really see it. Put it closer. There we go.
I don't know if Haney read this book, but his conclusion of what law is, what it isn't, and its operation. And this book was written in the 1800s. This book was written not too long ago. I think in 2004 is the publishing date. I could be off on that date.
What's that other book you just had up? What's the other book you had?
Oh, this is White by Law. This is the White by Law book.
Okay.
So let me see. This was published in publishing date 2006. So their breakdown of what is law and who gets to make law and enforce law. We look at President Trump right now, we're looking at a man that doesn't want to follow the law. And this is what they've been railing against him about since he's been in office. Forget the law. You had Kelly Loeffler, Republican appointed senator. She was appointed by Brian Kemp down here in Georgia. Her and her husband dumped stocks during inside trading scheme before coronavirus hit. They knew the impact that this particular virus was going to have on the market, and so they did what greasy blue collar rich millionaires do. I don't even know if they blue white. They're white collar, if I'm not mistaken. And they dumped stocks. They dumped the stocks because they knew a crash was coming. That's punishable by jail time, hefty fines, et cetera, et cetera. Bill Barr and the Department of Justice dropped the charges. Like Rodney King charges was dropped. Like the system of right wing and left wing in this country, please don't get it wrong. I don't want anybody to get it confused. I don't trust the liberals as much as I don't trust the fascists, I'm gonna call them, the conservatives in this country. They're the same two wings of the same bird. But if we're being honest, progress was made more through one side of that party than it was to the other. The problem was things get convoluted with political power, and so long as they could keep us oppressed, Martin Luther King spoke out against liberals, and Malcolm X spoke out against liberals. And I say that to say that how laws are formed, the crime bill of Joe Biden, it incentivized states like Minnesota to really become more racist. These places became more racist because the federal government gave them money, militarized them. I know. I used to hustle in my housing projects, Hamels projects for Rockaway, Queens. Me and my dude Suge had our little crib, and the cops bust our door down and threw a low percussion grenade inside the apartment. Like I lived this. This is a part of my life experience, so nobody can't tell me nothing at all. I lived this. And a lot of Democrats signed on to that bill. A lot of the Congressional Black Caucus signed on to that bill. It devastated our families, devastated us. And it bolstered these devils in police uniforms who are now the last vestige of white supremacy insofar as they could physically put their hands on us and touch us. The rest of them got to use the power of the pen. This is why the appointment of judges under Trump has been so relevant to the right. Mitch McConnell doesn't care if Trump is the next president going forward, or even if he's the next senator. They got the judges to fight everything that the liberal left is going to put forward for the next forever, basically. They have it. They have the majority in the Supreme Court. Most of the federal judges are Trump appointed, 91, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. So we are still in a battle right now. And like my brother Dr. Logic said on one of our previous shows, is something that we speak about often. Constitutional conventions are needed, because without having constitutional conventions to draft up new amendments to the Constitution for the protection of ADOS, we're going to continue this to be subjugated. This is going to keep going on and on and on and on. They're just going to find a new way to do it, but they're going to continue to do it. And we need drastic measures to go along with our reparative justice claim, our reparations. It has to happen. It has to. So I'm going to let my brothers come in and say we passed the 2-hour mark and give their final closing words. And I'll just say a little something and close it out.
Before we do that, I want to ask you a question real quick. I want to ask y'all, or propose to y'all a question. I had somebody who I consider to be a white ally, if we want to use that term. It's a guy I've known for a long time, went to school with, and he's always been on the right side of a lot of these issues. And I appreciate him for that. He actually speaks out. I've seen him go at, have words with his own, family member, his own mama, I'm like, word, I respect you for that, When he asked a question, he was like, do you think that policing has less to do with the racism in police officers and more to do with them having more to do with our economic position, more to do with us likely to be impoverished and us likely to live in more impoverished neighborhoods to where they are over policed and there's more crime here, so they more on edge. And so do you think the issues with police shooting us have to do with an increased amount of, or maybe the pressures put on them being in our communities where they've been made an adversary? Basically, is our economic position at the bottom, and being in neighborhoods where there's more crime at, is that one of the reasons why we're seeing police? And does that have more to do with it, or is it more to do with the racism of police officers? What do y'all think about that?
I'll let you go ahead with.
Yeah. So I'll say this, right? I was in law enforcement. You understand? And nobody's economic condition has anything to do with the type of person you are on the inside. If you're an evil, monstrous person, you're going to kick babies, mace babies, stomp women, beat up children. That don't have nothing to, that's called humanity we talking about. You understand? So what is it that's making you want to be violent when you don't need to be violent? Is it somebody's economic condition? Or the chances are you have a problem with someone's race. We did another show where we showed that Black people get murdered most by police than anyone else. You understand that even though Black people are only 14% of the population, we make up 24% of all people killed by police. So when we go to the data, that answers a lot of our questions. You understand? And when we do all the information that we talked about today had nothing to do with economic status. Everything that has been done to us has been race-based. We can't even get into no class-based struggles and warfare because we have never defeated or won the war or ended the war.
Facts.
That was about race.
Facts.
It's always been about race with us, and it will always be about race until we do it and resolve that issue. A lot of people want to say, well, we live in a post-racist society. Well, my reply to them is, when did that happen? What took place that ended racism? Because we didn't talk about how white and racism was originated in legislative language in Virginia. We put dates on it, we put actors in it, and we understand. We put some understanding on it. So if we can tell you where it began, you want to tell me that it doesn't exist anymore, you got to tell me what the end date was. When did it end? What caused it to end? And how did it end? And where was the restitution and the repair for the damage that it caused?
There you go.
So if we don't have none of that, I don't want to hear. So now a lot of people have subconscious racism and they don't even know it. And I can get into that using some of Chris Welsing's work in another show as well. So they respond how they feel that they should. So you feel that subconsciously, even if this isn't in the front of your mind, that you can treat Black folks a certain way because you've always seen the history of our treatment be that way. And if you already don't have no consciousness and you're already a monster and an evil devil on the inside, you ain't got no problem with that. But the chances of you beating up someone that looks different than you is going to always be greater than you beating up someone that looks like your mama, that looks like your daddy, and all the people that you love. So I answer it like that.
Definitely. I mean, I got a bunch of stuff going on. I'm looking all over the place.
Can I give my perspective on it?
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I just want to say, the times that I encountered problems with police, I remember one incident when I was I think I was like middle school or high school. I want to say I was like a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I did some, stupid, but basically it was a cop car behind the school bus. I got off the school bus, and a cop car was driving away, and I don't know what got into me, but I spit at the cop car. I didn't hit the car, obviously, but maybe he saw me spitting, or she saw me spitting, and so she just busted a U-turn and it went through the ditch, chased me down, and tackled me in the street, put the cuffs on me, I'm all tore up and all skint up in the street. And I'm just like, yo, was that necessary? That wasn't necessary. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why she was so brutal like that, to a kid. And, I was really just playing, I didn't think nothing of it, but she chased me down and had me all skint up and bleeding in the street with cuffs. And I'm like, yo. And another time that happened, I was, I can't tell you how many times I've been profiled and pulled over and accused of selling drugs. I'm at the grocery store. My mom is in the store. But supposedly I'm selling dope in the parking lot, or I'm taking my wife to dinner. We getting out of dinner, and then you police He asked me a couple questions. I didn't have my driver's license on me. So when I tell him I don't got it, I'm gonna ask again, where's the driver? I don't have it. Dude twisted my arm, trying to yank me through my driver's side window. And then another one put a taser to my neck and tell me stop resisting. Like, my seatbelt is still on. This kind of crazy stuff, and roughing me up and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I don't get how a person could think that stuff like that is not racially motivated.
Yeah, because
none of these
he didn't
things
know
happen in impoverished communities.
and he doesn't know your economic status by looking at you.
He doesn't know my economic status, and where these events located was not in no impoverished community. It wasn't in no hood or no place where there's a whole lot of crime at. I'm talking about where that happened was one of the higher income places, relatively in the country, and it's in an area where it wasn't a whole lot of crime. But the officer had a history of racially targeted issues. So my response to that would be, I don't just like you said, I don't see how you can look at those videos that we showed earlier, where they just brutally just beating us and with just no regard for life. It's almost like, what kind of fire in you of racial animus does it take to do that?
Let me jump in real quick, because you made me think of something that I wanted to say when we were showing those clips and how it ties into everything we're talking about. Understand this system of white supremacy and racism from slavery to now, from private bondage to public subjugation, and how our people are looking into space. In that clip, you saw black folks as wearing the uniforms. But guess what? During slavery, you had black overseers. You understand? You had people like Stephen that you see on Django. We've always had these people. And that doesn't mean that just because you wear the police officer uniform that automatically you embody this type of personality. But understand and be aware that those same type of people, full of self-hate, just want to be close to power, and they have already identified that anything dealing with whiteness is where the power is at. They will do anything to be accepted into that society. So they'll brutalize us more times quicker, get in with them, and even more harshly, and treat us worse more often and quicker than some white folks will. Sometimes some of these people that look like us, that want to be accepted in the white supremacy power structure, are more brutal and violent to us than even the white people are. Understand that it's about race, but it doesn't exclude you because of race. It's about the psychology of it all and how it translates into your attitudes and behavior.
Yeah.
Well, let me say,
Go ahead.
it's definitely
my closing thing, and then I'm out.
It's definitely that's all I gotta say. It's definitely racist. I mean, it's, even when as where L was talking about, Dr. Logic was talking about the Stephen from Django types, they've always been a part of this thing. Look at Candace Owens, and she's not even one of us. She's not lineage based here in the United States of America, but people think her and King faces. And then I'm seeing some other quote unquote black Republicans that Fox News now has that they could throw up on
I saw something today.
Yo, it's like, so we're fighting battles on so many fronts, but my thing is, right, pick up more guns, proverbially, of course. In this sense, in the other sense, I feel that we need to start exercising our Second Amendment rights as citizens, something that they could have never and should have never tried to take from us in the first place, unless they were saying we wasn't citizens. There's so many things that this federal government came up short on when it came to our people and our plight. And the day of reckoning is here. The day of reckoning is here, from coronavirus to the intifada, this uprising that's going on in the United States of America, which has spread out worldwide. We are witnessing, or as my lessons say, powers change as the ethers change, and we're witnessing that right now. So we've been on here for a minute. It's one of our longest shows. So if any one of y'all had anything else y'all wanted to add.
I just want to say, subscribe, hit the like button, share this to your friends and family. If you don't share the actual video, share the information that you came from this video with the people. Go back, watch it again 2, 3, 4 times. The books that we referenced today were The Bloody Shirt by Stephen Budansky. We had this is another one you have to have. I don't know any history and statistics compiled that are better than The Red Record by Ida B. Wells. Abba talked about the unconstitutionality of slavery, White by Law. And was there another one?
From Here to Equality.
From Here to Equality by Dr. Darity.
That's
absolutely.
Right.
So
The Invention of the White Race.
That's the one I was thinking of.
That's
the
right.
Invention of the White
Race. I could throw this to round out the night based on the topic. I could throw this one in there too. The Dogs of God, Columbus, the Inquisition, and the defeat of the Moors. You want to talk about some racism? Yo,
we read around here.
The Moors had to have paintings.
You snapped when you pulled that one out, man.
Look, the Moors, whom they relabeled Moriscos, had to have paintings of quote unquote white Jesus in their homes as part of the proof that they have fully converted from Islam to Christianity. So here's another good one, y'all.
Yo, yeah, you showed out with that one. You showed out with that one.
Understand this history.
So, and how the Irish became white. That one.
All of it. We're gonna keep mentioning these books. This is stuff that you have to know.
That's
Every
right.
show, we're gonna try to drop some knowledge on you, pick up some ammunition. You have to read. They hide this stuff in books. You can Google all day, but if you don't know what to Google, if you don't know what questions to ask, you'll never get the right answers.
That's right.
That's all I got to say. I'm ready to roll.
Yo, I just want to say in closing, now is a great time to understand what whiteness is and understand what we need to do to end whiteness, so we can end the caste status of blackness, And I would say this is a great time to be educating yourself on this so you can engage in conversation. Because right now, with this thing, it's opened up more quote unquote white Americans to have these type of conversations to figure out what is looking to be fixed. And let me say one more thing, right? If you don't know what you need to be advocating for, let me tell you right now, you need to go to ados101.com/black-agenda. ados101.com/black-agenda. You do not need to be advocating for no, what is that thing called? The Black Lives Matter agenda. You do not need to be advocating for that. You do not need to be advocating nothing dealing with the Black Futures Lab. Let me tell you that. Because all that is a class-based, far leftist agenda with HR 40 that includes Black immigrants so they can steal reparations from ADOS. Now, and I'm getting too long with it, but just let me say this too. Like, I have no problem with investigating America's, culpability in some of the Caribbean countries, like Haiti or whatever, being oppressed. I have no problem with that. But that's a separate issue than when we're talking about reparations for us, what we did over here, building America. We made that contribution. That's a separate thing. Going through slavery, going through the Black codes, all these things we dealt with here in America. This in reparations is an American claim for the American government to those who made those contributions and suffered those ills in America. So that if you go and look at that Black Lives Matter, Black Futures Lab with Alicia Garza and that Black agenda, that's a lie. That's straight up. Just they took something that was class-based politics, they rebranded it. They say we're gonna give some to HBCUs, but we're gonna make sure we open up opportunities for LGBT and trans and we're gonna add black immigrants to HR 40. That's not a black agenda. That's an anti-black agenda for ADOS. That's really an anti-ADOS agenda, because what you got to understand is what we want is to lift us off the bottom caste. I'm all for class uplifting, the class politics in America. I'm all for doing something that helps everybody in America. That's not at the super extreme top, right? But not if that just comes with just lifting all the boats, but the ones that's at the bottom, we not even understand. We don't have boats. We crabs. The crab, when the tide rises, does the crab rise too? No, the crab doesn't rise because he's a bottom feeder. So understand that the rising tide lifts all boats. Stuff. Oh, that's going to disproportionately help black folks. Okay, but it's not going to change our status at the bottom, and we are the people who suffered the most and built the country. So no, when they ask you what do you want, you tell them the Black Agenda on ADOS101.com. You don't let them fall for the Black Lives Matter Black Agenda, which is not a Black agenda. It's a whack agenda. It's not. It has nothing to do with us at all. Matter of fact, it hurts us more than it helps us. Go read it. It even talk about immigration. They want to do open borders. It's funny. We can do a whole show. Last point on that, right? Go look at it. Notice how she used she got a bunch of big money to do this whole census in the Black community, and she uses it all she found in the census was stuff like, oh, Black folks believe that we need more government aid. Black folks believe that police brutality is a problem. We already know that 80%. Okay, we already know this stuff. But when she wants to make her point about we need to do open borders, okay, what's Black folks' opinion on that? How many did 80% of Black folks agree with that? I don't think so. And there's plenty. Show me the studies to show how that helps us. Or does it hurt us? The studies are showing that. And so I just want to say, that's not hating on nobody. That's not. We just got to keep it real, because what we want is something that lifts us off the bottom. That's what we want here. And ending whiteness, white folks, you're gonna have to concede something. You're gonna have to give up part of that, because you understand man. Last thing, I promise, the last thing, right? Look at Minnesota. Antonio Moore talked about this. Go look at Minnesota, right? Minnesota is propped up on policing in prisons. That's the money they got from the crime bill that's injected into their budgets. It actually allowed them to undergird many of the whites that didn't have jobs that through the deindustrialization, to get police jobs and prison jobs and these type of jobs. That's what a huge line item in their budget is. I believe it's 1/3 of the discretionary spending is policing. And who are they policing? They policing us. So once again, we're the legs that prop up the table that they eat off of. That's gotta end. That's what we talking about. That's what we want. And that's the conversation we need to have with white America. Peace, y'all.
Definitely. We had another good show tonight, in my opinion, of course. It started off rocky. I don't know what was going on. Then we kept getting booted off, and I didn't know what was going on. But I think that we more made the case tonight.
Yo, bro, you muted. You muted. Can't hear you. You muted. You muted. Your sound is out. Nobody can hear you, bro.